Pete Aidney. Welcome to So Money, aka Mr. Money Mustache. How lucky are we on this Tuesday?
Uh, well, we'll determine that based on how well the interview goes.
Well, that'll depend on your answers because I ask pretty good questions. It's really just
Yeah,
it's on you. It's all
I can
on
believe that.
you.
Yeah.
Um, It's been a minute, Mr. Money Mustache, and if audience, if you've been living under a rock, maybe you haven't heard of Mr. Money Mustache, sort of the poster guru for the fire movement. And you and I go way back. I remember visiting you in your home in Colorado with the Yahoo Finance team, sitting in your backyard, talking about your philosophies on money and spending and budgeting. Do you remember those days?
Yeah, it was more than a decade ago, and I remember I had, like, a little kindergarten boy back then who is now a 20-year-old,
Wow.
and you guys were one of the first interviewers that stopped by when, the Mr. Money Mustache blog was first starting to just get out there and get unexpected news headlines and interviews and everything, and it was an honor.
It was an honor for us, and I have to ask, your son was such a sweetheart and very talented. I remember he made his own music. Is he still into music?
Yeah, that is still his main thing. He just devotes, like, 12 hours a day to
Wow.
sitting in front of the computer in this very room that I'm using because he still loves the hospitality of his mom and dad. In our two respective houses, he has a music studio in each, and he just works all day.
Wow, that's so nice to know that, like, you get the spark at that young age and it endures. Well, things have changed for you over the last decade. I wanna catch up. I wanna catch up on the blog. I wanna catch up on life. I think maybe we could start with the Mr. Money Mustache. I mean, when we met at this very pivotal time in your career, you had started this massively popular blog, Mr. Money Mustache, which for those who aren't familiar or wanna refresh, it was really the foundation of the blog, and you can jump in and correct me, but I my sense of it was, here is you were first of all behind kind of a guise, Mr. Money Mustache. No one really knew who you were. So it had this aura of mystery. But what you were preaching was very sort of aspirational. People wanted to learn how you were thinking about money and budgeting. The idea of being frugal was a flex. And this idea of living minimally, I remember, I don't think you really drove. You had simple meals. You spent very conservatively, but you were very happy as well. Take me back to those beginnings of Mr. Money Mustache and what it was really founded on, like what you really wanted people to understand about money and maybe even yourself, because I think people blog to kind of digest and unpack their own thinking around certain issues.
Yeah, well, can already tell that I have to go into my usual job of myth dispeller because even back then it was not about simple meals and not driving cars and all this other stuff. It was about just being moderately purposeful about your decisions and making sure that if you do choose to spend money, especially if it's going to be a lot of it, then it's on something that you enjoy. And if you have a choice between two things, like something that's good for you and inexpensive, and maybe not so good for you and expensive, like drinking at a bar is a good easy example, then maybe you choose the good for you option every now and then more often. So if you make these decisions just over time, then it tends to lead to this compounding snowball of massively increased wealth, lower costs of living, and the possible end result is that you can retire much earlier. And that's the path that I happen to choose because at age 30, we wanted to be full-time parents so we could devote our time, not splitting it between career and child raising. And it just led to a bunch of articles on how to do this exactly in all the different areas of life,
Hmm.
whether it's like exercise or housing or your meals or all these other things. And I guess people were interested in that. So it led to an interesting writing career for me. And now we're in 2026, and I've kind of like definitely reduced the writing that I'm doing. And it's really not that I don't have as many ideas to write about, but I just have so much other fun stuff going on in retirement. I'm not willing to sacrifice it and sit in front of the computer and type all the time. So it's kind of a proof that retirement really happens.
Well, I want to talk about your retirement, but going back to those days, and you mentioned myths. What were some of the other misconceptions about what you were trying to educate people on? Yeah, looking back in hindsight, maybe even too, like maybe at the time you didn't realize it, but now you're like, you know what? I want to correct some things for the record.
Yeah, I think everybody sees it in a different lens when they see ideas online. One of the biggest surprises for me was that there were haters to begin with. Like, I thought I was presenting these ideas that were kind of obvious and definitely positive. Like, who doesn't want to be healthier and who doesn't want to have more money? And then people would just come in and chime in with like all these different objections and conspiracy theories, like, oh, he's just doing this because he's like a sponsored corporate shill for something, even though we don't know what it is. And so people will find problems in anything. And because the internet is a big place and we have a negativity bias where we tend, as the writer or the creator, to see the complaints a lot more loudly than we see positive feedback or praise. So that was a surprise to me.
Mm.
And people just attacked everything. Mainly, the biggest thing is just your lifestyle would lead to a crappy life if I tried to save money. Therefore, I'm not even going to try. And that
Well,
was always a surprise for me.
if it's any consolation, Pete, when I first started writing about money, I remember it was like, I think it was USA Today or US News and World Report. They said, "Hey, Farnoosh, can you just write like your daily or weekly spending diary or something for us?" And I mentioned that I spent, I don't know, like 11 or $12 on hangers. I was finished. I thought my life was over. Like people were commenting the meanest things. I'll never forget. It was one of my bosses who said, for every negative comment on a blog or an article, there's probably 100 positive people liking what you said, but they just didn't say anything.
Yeah.
Because that the impulse is to write something negative. Like, how many times do we go to a restaurant, we loved the meal, we never wrote a review. But as soon as we find that hair in that spaghetti or that fly in our soup or whatever, we will take it down.
Yeah. And it's a good lesson for everybody. Like, even if you think about how many Taylor Swift songs are there about her being, she's fighting back at the
Her
haters.
successes.
And, she fights back against one of her albums is called Reputation because she thought that she had a bad reputation. I'm like, what are you talking about, Taylor Swift? You're like the most popular and beloved figure possibly on earth with the highest positive name recognition. And she still feels hated. And that kind of just shows that, you only see the negative. And she even knows that like everybody screams at her shows and says, we love you, but she still feels
Yeah.
persecuted. And that's just human nature. Like it's really hard to have critics, but it's a real advantage if you learn to put that in perspective. And if you ever
Hmm.
look, if you're like a website owner, like we are, and you look at the number of comments versus the number of times something was read, it's actually even less than 1% of people who ever read, or less than 1% of people who read ever leave a comment. And then, of course, about 1%, 1 to 50, depending on, Yahoo Finance used to be famous for getting a lot of negative
My
comments. A lot of haters and grumpy people would read that website.
man, I mean, I had to get security involved one day. People were so rude. Really, really, yeah. It was like just like a little like behind the scenes, like sites like that. They actually have, if they're on top of things, they actually have a whole department dedicated to cybersecurity for the purposes of, threats, online threats. If someone ever threatens your life or threatens to harm you, like there is a whole team at the ready to kind of go through the protocols. And unfortunately, I had to do that once, but it just means, you're making an impact. Like
Yeah,
that's the positive.
exactly. There's a price to pay for success in every industry and every job you do.
Now, you achieve financial independence very early. As you said, your goal was 30. Tell us about what the goal initially was, how you would like remind me, did you achieve it kind of on schedule? Did you actually retire at 30? And then what was on the other side of that? Was it all your dreams come true?
Yeah, the answer is yes. Technically, it was just before my first birthday. And then my wife at the time was slightly older, so she was 31. And our goal was to have enough passive income to support our desired level of spending. And we did reach it. And it was all just by having, it was kind of a mixture. In theory, you just have to have a bunch of stocks invested, like index funds. But in our case, we had a rental house that was a mostly paid off house. So the majority of the rent became cash flow for us. But there's many ways to do it. And it's easier if your expenses are lower, of course, right? So we had a strategically low cost of living. It was easy to meet that with just our saved money. And then we did a mixture of being totally retired, starting businesses that made money and starting businesses that lost money. So I like to say that really the retirement cushion was what made it all possible. And we could have just not worked, which is another thing that the haters sometimes get confused is they're like, well, you're a blogger now and you're a carpenter, so you're not retired. The internet retirement police, as I call them. But really, it's just, there's a very simple formula called the 4% rule. where if you have this much savings, then you technically don't have to work. And it's pretty much time proven through all different ways you can calculate it.
How much credit, Pete, do you give kind of the economy at the time as you were building wealth? People would, another maybe criticism, not of you, but just of like trying to achieve fire currently with where the economy's at, the uncertainty mostly of the stock market. The AI bubble has a lot of people concerned. The job market's already reeling from it. Do you think it would be more challenging slash different to do what you did back in the early aughts? I said what is it? The aughts, the 2008s
Yeah,
was you
I
started
say
kind of like in the mid
2000s.
2000s. Yeah.
People ask that question all the time. Like
Hmm.
from the year 2005 when I retired until now, there's always a case for what would have been easier in the past. First of all, when you actually look at the numbers, that's incorrect. It's usually always about the same. Right now, if
Which
someone happened
numbers? Which numbers are you talking about?
like the stock market returns over the previous 30 years and what you
Hmm.
might expect over the next 30. So the real secret sauce in all this, if there is one, is living in the United States. So the United States is probably the easiest place to earn money and then retire early because our salaries are so high here and everything is so cheap, despite what Americans like to think. But the ratio of your income here to the cost of necessities like food, clothing, all your household goods is just off the charts compared to like Canada, where I came from, or Europe. Most wealthy European countries, they still have lower salaries and high cost of living and higher taxes. So USA is still great, and it's going to remain great in my opinion, despite, the negative news headlines. It's just kind of an invincible country. But aside from that, I didn't retire at the best time because the 2008 financial crisis happened just 3 years after my retirement, which is one of the worst times early in your retirement if the value of all your assets falls a lot. And I happen to have a lot of housing. I had like a hobby construction company, in fact, at the time. So I lost a lot of money on houses that I was building and trying to sell.
Hmm.
Suddenly they were worth half as much. And even then, my retirement survived just fine. And then, of course, we entered a giant stock market boom that's from like 2010 until the present. So anybody who started right at the crash time has actually had the best savings experience perhaps in history because the stock market has gone up so quickly. So right now is actually a great time to retire because your assets are probably worth a ton compared much more than you expected.
I wish that was true for me. I mean, I look at that. I probably would like my daughter asked me the other day, when do you want to retire? She's 9. I don't even know if I knew that word when I was 9, but I guess she listens to the podcast. And I said to her, I think I'd like to keep going. I call it beast mode. I'm in beast mode right now, Pete, like
That's
just
cool.
working, but I love what I do. But I think I'd love to offload some of that work, probably starting at 55. I'm 46. I could,
So long in the future. You're
I
going to work an
know.
entire career on top
I just
of a
started a
career
new
that you had just
business
worked.
though. I just started a new business. Do you ever get that inspiration to kind of like start something really big? Because you could do, I mean, correct
No.
me if I'm wrong, you could do anything you want, right? You have the
Yeah,
resources.
sure. I mean, within reason. I can't start like a semiconductor fabrication company or something that is like $300 billion investment. But
I mean, you could. You could. There's
I
a
mean,
path.
yeah,
There's a
it's
path.
true. I could become like a tech CEO again, I guess. Like I'm still pretty good at technology, but I very much prefer my leisure. Like I'm big onto like the slow flowing lifestyle. Like you wake up and go for a sunrise walk and have coffee and do all these pleasant morning activities. I'm not in it for business.
Yeah. Well, I think what I've learned about your approach to personal finance is that a lot of your success too is inherent to your kind of tendencies, your personality. You're not an impulsive person. You as you just explained, you like the sort of simple pleasures in life. Can you talk a little bit about that and how your personality was sort of a perfect match in some ways to this approach to money? And building wealth in the way that
Yeah.
you did.
That's a good question. Well, it was accidental for me because I like what I like and I didn't change what I like in order to be able to retire early. But for me, I happen to enjoy what you might call productive activities rather than consuming. So I would way rather spend my Saturday like renovating a kitchen or building a house or building a deck than, being on a golf course or going to like the 5 Michelin star restaurants or, showing off in any way. Like I just love hard work, solving problems, preferably outdoors and using my body. Like outdoor construction is my favorite thing in the world. Always has been, always will be. So that's an activity that doesn't cost anything. It happens to make, a small amount of money, even when I just do it for myself. And if I wanted to make a business out of that, it could make a medium amount of money. It could have like maybe a $300,000 income if I ran a little contracting business in my neighborhood. So I definitely encourage that in my writing too. Not everyone has to be a carpenter, but if you think about activities and what you enjoy, there's going to be some that are productive and are good for you, and there are going to be some that are purely consumption, like, passive luxury travel where you're just being served by everybody all the time. And one of them costs a lot more than the other. And I would argue that most people get satisfaction from creating and solving problems and expressing themselves, even if they've never done it before. They might have done passive tourism and sort of enjoyed it, but maybe they'd like being a tour, organizer more, because then you're kind of the boss and you're using your creativity to give experiences to people and meeting people. And there's just always ways to flip something to make it more productive and more satisfying, which also usually makes the financial side of it better too.
I remember when we were in Colorado, you lived outside Denver, right?
I did at the time, yeah, in Longmont, and now I actually live in Denver because I made a little move, but that
Yeah,
could
we'll
be
talk about that. We'll talk about
another
that in a minute.
subject.
I want to learn about your new single lifestyle. Tell me a little bit about what you've learned regarding raising kids, being a parent, and saving money. What do you want people to know? Those especially who are afraid of growing their families for the fact that they hear it's so expensive.
Much like taking care of yourself as an adult, raising kids is entirely your own decision on how much it costs. And it's funny because when you read these surveys, it says, how much does it cost to raise a child? And it's always broken down by income, like where the richer people spend way more on raising their kids. I'm like, surprise, surprise. It's because they're choosing more expensive stuff for their kids. And if you can afford it, and if that's what you choose to spend your money on, that's great. Like it's super fun to, do the $10,000, trip to your Europe or whatever. But you also don't have to do that. Like kids do not need your fancy adult stuff in order to have a prosperous, creative childhood. And in fact, you can in some ways suppress it if you don't let them do what they are really made to do, which is explore and play creatively in their world, their own
Hmm.
world. That's how humans were made to learn, is by exploring an environment and seeing how it responds, like ideally in a natural environment like a forest or something.
Hmm.
So you can have a great childhood that doesn't cost much. It costs nothing to go to the forest, it costs nothing to play with Legos almost, to play with your friends. And the more you schedule them up, the more you're going to spend. But I don't think you're actually making their lives better by creating that stereotypical rich kid, maybe East Coast type of childhood.
Yeah. Preach. Louder for the financial expert living in Montclair in the back. So, before we were kind of recording, we were talking about comparison culture. And I think it also reminded me of I was reminded of that because of what you just said about raising kids and how, you could spend all the money on raising your kids. And I think part of that is you get sucked into this these expectations of what it means to be a quote unquote good parent and providing for your kids. Social media is not helpful in that department, which again I think speaks also to your own ability to stay strong in those moments of pressure. But have there been times in your life, Pete, where you have been drawn to temptation or your curiosity has led you to paths that surprised you that might have even cost you some money?
Well, is this still like a child raising question? Or are you
Nope.
thinking about
It's
the
more like for
overall
your
picture?
own life. Yeah. Like, uh, you know, have you ever been a victim of temptation, of your own temptations?
Yeah, I like to think of it as an experiment. Like, and everything in life is an experiment. If you haven't tried something before, then absolutely try it and then evaluate whether or not it's something that makes your life better. And of course, if you can afford it, that's always a factor as well. And so I tried various luxurious things throughout my life, including before and after retirement,
Hmm.
and always kind of settled at what works best for me. And that's one of the reasons, like, people think that FIRE and my particular story is all about being cheap and trying to retire as quickly as possible. But it wasn't really like that because I was lucky enough to have a very high income career and I was
Hmm.
married to a high income person. So there was really no shortage of money. It was more like, you know, money was easy for us, and we just settled at a level where we thought it was plenty, and then just didn't go beyond the level of plenty. So anyway, yeah, I just also don't have a really expensive taste. As I mentioned earlier, the idea of producing, it saves me from wanting to buy a big motor yacht and just float around in Chicago Harbor all the time because, like that's not really creating anything. It's just burning
Yeah.
gas.
What was your childhood like, Pete? Did you have a similar upbringing in terms of life experiences, like running in the forest, like all
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably that really helped me because I had what I thought was a really great childhood. I look back on it really fondly. And of course, that reflects on what I want for my child or wanted. And now he's grown up too. But I tried to recreate that as well, make it facilitate it for him. And
Hmm.
it was just a small town, not very high income. I come from a somewhat big family. There's four of us kids in the family. So I have a brother and two sisters. And we just, our parents were relatively laid back. They just let us do whatever we wanted, which means we went out there and explored the town and found friends and rode bikes and swam in the river and, you know, did well in school because there wasn't really much else to do. And it was also kind of in the era before social media and computers weren't even much of a thing back then because I'm that old. So it forced kids to do something else. There was nothing really to entertain you. TV sucked back then. There wasn't like, we didn't even have the ability to call up any movie to watch instantly. So the relative boredom of outside entertainment forced us to have our own entertainment, which I thought was very enriching.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's just such a different world, right, today. There's so many headwinds. And so, since we last spoke, I want to transition now to your life today. You've sort of hinted at a few ways that you're living your life today. You're living in Denver. Your family dynamic has changed. Your son has grown. You wrote about your divorce. What were some of the big financial takeaways from those life pivots? Like, let's start with your divorce. That was probably not something you had written into the plan, right? And I read too that it kind of split your assets. How did that impact your financial life, but also your view on like saving and money and marriage and all that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I got very lucky in the divorce department. My former wife was a wonderful person to be married to and a wonderful person to be divorced from. Like we maintained really good relations the whole time. And my sympathies, it doesn't always work out for people that way. And that's when divorce gets expensive. In our case, we had plenty between us. So when we split up our assets, we were both equally well off because you don't have as high a cost of living, of course, if there's just one person instead of two, other than your housing, right? So like I bought myself a new house, and so that reduced my savings by the price of the house. But at that level, it's not really a huge effect, right? Because we were relatively wealthy, having had all those years to save. And the harder it is, divorce is harder when there's a scarcity of money because
Hmm.
there's more to fight over. And of course, also if the people happen to be really mad at each other and they just want to inflict harm on the other person, that makes it really horrible too. So definitely be very careful about who you get married to. I
You
think people
marry.
do tend to do it a bit early and capriciously in their young
Hmm.
lives because they don't think about like what will this look like in the likely event that we part ways someday, and would that be an amicable parting? Because if not, you probably shouldn't get married in the first place
Mm.
because it's very likely that you'll want to go your separate ways someday, and you want that to be a positive process that you move on from. And that's what we've had. And our lives have been, separate but close, still in the same neighborhood, and really great. That was more than 8 years ago. And, I've, it forced me to do a lot of new things in life that I wouldn't have done, which helped me live a more full life. So it's been positive, I think.
Yeah, tell me about some of the choices you've made. I'm on your blog right now, one of the latest posts, although I don't know if you wrote it that recently, about your unexpected journey to hormone replacement, TRT.
Oh
Thanks,
yeah.
thanks for
That
writing
one,
that. I think that's a really important thing to share.
yeah, that was like that's certainly not the normal stuff that I write about, but I kind of just share anything that's useful. And like as getting to be towards middle age and having a partner now who is a physician who's like really knows a lot about aging and hormones because she is a fertility doctor, then it's
Mm.
It's just something I felt like, hey, a lot of my readers are around the same age group, and they might not know the same stuff that I have stumbled into. So I thought I'd share it. Some people got mad at me for writing that article, but
Why?
in general, because some people just don't like the idea of medical intervention, maybe, and
Okay.
or they thought it was like a sales pitch, which it wasn't. I'm not making any money off that article or anything. And that's also like hormone replacement gets painted with a sketchy brush because there's also, a lot of online scams built around it, like get jacked or, sexual performance enhancing stuff or whatever.
Right, right, right.
Really, it's just a very natural thing for people for my age. Is if your hormone levels drop, there's like a cheap and reliable way to replace it for women and men that your own doctor can help you with, and it
Hmm.
shouldn't be expensive. It shouldn't be a sales pitch. And basically, it just gives you an extra 10 or 20 years of feeling young and having a young body. So, like, for the right people, it's not, it's not, it's just good. It's just a nice
Yeah.
invention.
And
But anyway,
a good return on your investment. You said
yeah.
you mentioned you bought an apartment or a house. Um, was that unexpected? Did you imagine you would be doing that, at any point post fire?
Um, yes, I did know that because I've always loved houses and I actually enjoy, I'm one of the weird people who enjoy moving. So I've had many houses and lived many places in my life. And I'd settled in Longmont for a long time for the stability of child raising, but kind of to celebrate my son's 20th birthday and the fact that my social life has moved south to Denver and Longmont is kind of out in the sticks. It's a nice town, but it's 40 miles from Denver. So you end up driving back and forth a lot if you have friends in Denver. So I decided to buy a place in this neighborhood that really works for me in Denver. It's like a super, super walkable, gorgeous paradise little neighborhood. And it costs a bit more here mainly because the houses are bigger on average. So
Hmm.
I'm kind of like doubling my living expense in a way, my housing expense. But it was worth it to me, and it was just a decision because my savings and investments have gone well over the years, and I can afford to spend a bit more now than I expected. And this is happening to a lot of us in the fire movement, by the way. Most people overcheap and underspend, and they're like overly conservative. And then you get through your 40s and you're like, darn it, I got about twice as much as I expected. So what should I do? And it's nice to decide purposefully if you do want to spend more money on something that's important to you. Sometimes the answer is no, and you just go on as it is. But you should always be questioning yourself and questioning your old assumptions. And that's what I
Hmm.
did here. And I came up with this idea of like, yeah, I'm going to buy this house that has a bit more room for me and it's in a bit of a nicer area. And I think it was the right decision. I've lived here a month now and it's like quite a joy.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you're in a really great place. It's been so nice to catch up. Um, I want to ask a little bit about your son too. And now you said he's turning 20. And does he have a lot of experience or what does he know about the Mr. Money Mustache brand and impact? And what do you think he's taken from that, if anything? Kids, they observe mostly. It's not even so much we have to tell them anything. They just watch us and they learn.
Yeah, I think that's been really interesting because I just lived, and his mom too, we just lived our lives according to our values. And some of those have passed on to him, but he's also so independent that you can't really tell him anything, tell him
Hmm.
what to do. He'll take that as a maybe piece of feedback and probably not necessarily adopt it. But he did turn out to be quite frugal, like sensible, but he's kind of generous, more generous than I expected. Like he'll
Hmm.
often buy things for his friends, for example, even though they're all young adults, he's a bit more well off than they are. And he likes to share, which I think is a great value. And he's a really, really kind person, very considerate, like almost like uncannily kind for because people make fun of 20-year-olds for being self-centered.
Yeah.
Somehow he's turned out this really generous, thoughtful guy. So I'm really happy for him. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him, and it's going to be very independent. I think maybe the independence is one of the things that really wore off. Is
Mm.
I never subscribed to normal social narratives. It was like do consider all the options and then do and try things that might be right for you, rather than just follow the path that someone tells you to
Hmm.
do. And that's very much how he seems to be living his life too.
How do you think about generational wealth? do you want to leave him your wealth, or do you have other thoughts on that? Because it
Yeah, that's
really
a
it
really good
varies.
question and very controversial. I think I'm not in favor of generational wealth, and I kind of subscribe. I think Warren Buffett talked about this too, but I think it's a real gift for people to make their own way in the world rather than just know that their future is going to be provided for them automatically by wealthy parents. And that's what happened to me, right? Like I didn't get any money from my parents, and for a while there was actually like a reverse flow, like my siblings and I have helped our parents in the past in certain financial situations just because we were all fortunate to have these great careers. And to me, that felt great to build my own wealth from pretty much nothing and then to have excess. And like, I would love my son to do that too. I like the idea of the generational wealth being there to support them if there is a problem like a disability or, an emergency or something. It's nice to have stability. But just to hand down and create a family dynasty, that's not my thing. And I don't think my son would particularly have wanted big inheritance from me either. But
Hmm.
we'll see. He's so young. Things probably change as he gets older.
Yeah, I read a book and interviewed the author, Die with Zero.
Oh
Really
yeah.
interesting perspective. Yeah, kind of flips this whole idea of, you know, culturally, and I don't think it's just here in the States, but this idea that you build, 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 save, 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 and then you leave it all to your heirs or whatever. But what if you kind of gift it all while you're living, because the idea of like being 60 and inheriting money from your parents, hey, no one's going to argue with that. But it would have been maybe more helpful to have gotten some of that support in your 30s or your 40s when you were trying to start the business or trying to buy the house or whatever, and you were healthier. So that's kind of that author's thought on that is like, why are we just sort of,
Mhm.
you know, because this way too we have more of an ability to not influence but decide, be more selective about how that money gets allocated as we are alive, and our children or whoever we want to give the money to can benefit from it. It's just another thought.
Yeah, for sure. That Bill Perkins has a great point there.
Mm-hmm.
And gifting while you're younger is good. And again, like, it's still a slippery slope, in my opinion, where you don't want to make things so posh and easy for your kids that they're denied this wonderful satisfaction of the hardship and the struggle and then the achievement to build their own wealth. But everyone might have a different perspective on that. But it's also, you can do creative tricks around the edges. Like, let's say you have grown children in their 30s and you become a grandparent and they have kids, you could gift them the fact that you travel to see them and help them out with their kids so that they can have date nights or vacations while you do the hard work of taking care of these kids. Or you could buy a vacation home and maintain like a really fun place that's within a short drive, an easy weekend visiting place like a lake house or something.
Mm-hmm.
Create family memories. So you're subsidizing them in the fact that they might not have been able to afford this cottage, but as a grandparent, you do it. And so that's a way of using your wealth to create memories while you're still young. And I think that's still kind of a win-win, right?
Yeah, I love that. Okay, I knew I said I was going to say goodbye, but I do have one more question is, have you changed your investing strategy at all over the years or more recently as, even if it's just like I'm getting older and my risk tolerance has changed, so I'm not entirely in equities 100% or whatever that is. And I think too, if you have any concerns about the current state of the world and, people are like the S&P 500 is not as diversified as it once was because it's majority these tech companies that are also very leveraged with AI, so that you need to actually be more diversified than that. So I just want to know where you're at, where your head's at right now with investing, your portfolio.
Yeah, I've always been a relatively unemotional and numbers-based person. So I've always been comfortable with like nearly 100% equities, just index funds. And so I've never been like carry much bonds or anything like that. I don't like cash because I kind of trust the system. Like I don't mind volatility. Some people do mind volatility. And for those people, having a broader asset allocation is a good idea. But if you think about just like this last 10 or 12 years, a lot of people in my situation would have been like, okay, time to protect what you've earned, time to sleep well at night. Let's diversify into tons of bonds. And then I would have missed out on like the biggest stock market rally kind of in history. So my only compromise is I tend to keep my houses mortgage free. So it's sort of like having
Mm,
a bond that pays your rent for you. And I'm only getting the equivalent of like whatever I would have paid on a mortgage for doing that. So that's
hmm.
one way to sort of balance it a little bit. But in general, I like stocks. I like holding a lot. Not everybody feels that way, but on average, the numbers tell you you'll come out further ahead the higher your percentage of equities over time. And for me, I generally make my decisions on numbers based on emotion. I'm more of like a robot slash you know, spreadsheet. Spreadsheets make my emotions rather than news headlines. And that's the other thing is I don't read the news. I
Mm.
avoid as much as possible. I don't worry about what this president or that president is doing or whether the world's going to hell because it's not. I just maintain a permanent optimism, which for the last 250 years has been the best strategy for an American. That's how you get ahead is assume everything's going to be great and invest accordingly.
Yeah. Hope for the best, plan for the
Mhm.
semi worst. Pete Aidney. See what I did there? I pronounced it correctly.
Oh yeah,
Aidney. Yeah. I
got it.
mean, I learn eventually.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. Just want to say, your writing in your voice and your presence has been such a real gift to the community, our personal finance community. Even though controversial at times, but controversy is good. It gets people talking. And that's what you have done. You've gotten people to really think more critically and honestly about their money. At times maybe disagree, but honestly, like that is such a gift really to the community. We need more layers of thinking about money and being thoughtful about money. And I appreciate all the candor on the show today. And let's not go another like 11 years. Let's keep in touch and you're welcome anytime. Thank you.
Sounds great. I hope to be around for a long time and continue to be out there trying to help.